While Pontiac is no longer with us, of all of the American car brands that once were, it seems that Pontiac has the greatest lasting impact of them all. Heck, even the viewers of this channel, when I polled for which American car company they would bring back, nearly everyone said Pontiac. Their daring ideas and desire to always push the envelope of performance and style helped them create some of the most iconic cars of the era. But it's the cars that they never actually got to bring into production that are even more insane, like the V12-powered Pontiac Firebird Pegasus or the Corvette fighting Banshee. So it's only right that we dive into 5 of the most daring concepts that Pontiac ever made. Number 5, the Pontiac Phantom. Now, the Pontiac Phantom was a swan song sort of last hurrah concept penned by the soon-to-retire GM designer Bill Mitchell in 1977. Bill had a long and illustrious career at General Motors that spanned decades and saw him at the helm of designing some of the most gorgeous cars, notably the Tri-5 Chevys, the second-generation Camaros, and more. Bill saw the way that the world was beginning to shift in the tail end of the 70s, with more of a push going towards compact econo boxes with no soul or road presence. With his career also coming to an end, he would work to pen one last masterpiece with the help of designer Bill Davis, which embodied everything that he loved about automotive design. A late 1970s interpretation of the gorgeous swept lines and ridiculous road presence of the Ghana's diesel cars. This stunning Pontiac design was based largely on the Grand Am and was created a secret of both the builds in the top-secret Studio X design area. The finished project was a design study only. The car had no functioning engine or running gear, but my God, did it look amazing. It took the core design of the Grand Am and just made it so much more slippery, with its new accentuated curves and streamlining. In its black color scheme, it looked particularly sinister as well, with some otherworldly road presence. Bill Mitchell had the finished full-size shell sent to GM's proving grounds for review by upper-level management, to hopefully get the green light to invest more resources into making an actual functioning version. But GM executive Howard Curl ordered the concept to be carted away from the proving grounds before it could really be critiqued. The bureaucracy had gotten to Bill Mitchell, and he resigned shortly after this incident. If the Pontiac Phantom would have been made, it would have likely featured the 400 cubic inch V8 mill from the 77 Can-Am and an automatic transmission, just to kind of let you know what would have been. But even with its stunning looks and with what the automotive landscape was becoming in the late 70s, it still probably wouldn't have sold that well. Number 4, the Pontiac Firebird Pegasus. But first, a quick message from this video's sponsor, Factor Meals. Now, if you're like me and you've been writing, researching, and making these videos while also working, you may not have much free time to cook, which is why I love Factor. They take the stress out of meal planning and set you up for success. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. With over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, protein plus, and more. And the best part about Factor is that they understand that life is hectic. So they offer flexible meal plans to fit your schedule. You can change your meal order nearly on a weekly basis, and with plans of 4 meals a week, all the way up to 18, you can really dial in your schedule. And speaking of schedule, you can pause or reschedule deliveries at any time. This is the most recent Protein Plus box that I just got from Factor, and let me tell you, it is delicious. So if you want to try Factor for yourself, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code RARECARS50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off of your next month of orders. That's code RARECARS50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month of orders. And thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video. Now, the Pontiac Firebird Pegasus is one of the most fascinating concepts that the brand ever built. And the entire project actually stemmed from some redesign work studies for the new second-generation Camaro. Jerry Palmer, who was one of the designers on the project, had the wacky idea of combining a 1958 Ferrari Testarossa grille with the second-gen Camaro body lines, and somehow molding it all together. And the crazy part was that it didn't look half bad. The more European lines of the second-gen Camaro lended themselves to this idea way better than the first-gen cars would have. Bill Mitchell, who at this point was still the head of design at GM, liked the concept and he wanted to bring a version to life. He figured, though, that this was more of a Pontiac-type project than a Chevy one, so he tasked them with bringing it into fruition, which they did by 1971. This new Pontiac Firebird Pegasus was the most European car that GM had ever made, so it was only right for the power plant to be more exotic. Now, in an ideal world, Pontiac would have maybe built their own V10 or V12 to go under the hood, but that just wasn't in the budget. Ferrari, though, offered to provide a V12 from their 365 GTC4 for this project, probably stemming from their new rivalry with Ford post the introduction of the GT40, this being an offer that Pontiac simply couldn't refuse. So, the Pegasus got a Ferrari V12 paired with a 5-speed manual transmission as well as a 4:10 rear gear ratio. The Pegasus was a stunner and a true halo car for Pontiac if they ever wanted to build something to take the Firebird into a more exotic range. Unfortunately, though, Pontiac would never fully commit to building their new exotic Super Firebird as a car, and as a result, only one Pegasus was ever made, which, funny enough, was often driven by Bill Mitchell himself until his death in 1988. Thankfully, though, the Pegasus still remains in working order and is often displayed at the discretion of the GM Heritage Foundation. Number 3, the Pontiac Stratostar. This car was the epitome of the jet age of neo-futuristic styling, all rolled into one vehicle that aimed to be the future of premium passenger cars. Penned by Paul Gillian and built in 1955, this 6-passenger coupe featured a bunch of absolutely wild styling choices, like roof slats that opened with the regular doors to increase headroom for occupants getting in and out of the car. Other notable styling choices included giant scalloped front fenders that gave the vehicle a very jet-like look and also acted as intakes. The Stratostar also had self-suspended fog lights that hung below the split front bumper and a full rear roll pan. Powering the Stratostar was a modified Pontiac 287 cubic inch V8 that was good for just about 235 horsepower, which was really good for 1955. With its futuristic styling, powerful V8, and its absolutely amazing visibility thanks to its super thin pillars, the Stratostar seemed like a glimpse into the future of Pontiac design, and it was unveiled at GM's Motorama in 1955 to a resounding applause. The car never saw production though, but some of the smaller styling cues did eventually trickle their way into other GM cars of the period, while the actual Stratostar concept car was unfortunately crushed. Number 2, the Pontiac Farrago CF428. Now, I know this is one that most of you haven't heard of because, well, I never even knew about this car until I was researching this video. Built in 1969, the Pontiac Farrago CF428 was the brainchild of its designer, Paul Farrago, and automotive visionary John DeLorean. Coming off of the shelving of DeLorean's Pontiac Banshee concept, which we'll talk about in a moment, John was looking for a new daring design study for the Pontiac brand, while Farrago was also looking to drum up hype for his new coach building house. DeLorean's desire to build a dramatic Italian-styled coupe could match perfectly with Farrago's desire to promote their coach building business, and as such, the project started. The Farrago CF428 was based off of a period Pontiac Grand Prix, with a 428 under the hood. Now this engine would have made around 370 horsepower or 390 horsepower if it was the HO version, which would have made this big-bodied coupe a pretty fast car even with all that hand-formed metal around it. The Grand Prix stock body was removed and replaced with the new Farrago designed coachwork, which, if you look at it, It looks a lot like a cross between a later AMC Javelin and a 1971 Mach 1, just with a bit of Italian pizzazz sprinkled into it, if you will. So let me know in the comments if you think those cars borrowed some design cues from the Farrago, being the Farrago came out before them. Anyway, the CF428 also received a set of custom wheels designed specifically for the car, which I have to say, looking at the pictures, do look a little bit off. A set of wire wheels might have benefited the looks of the car a lot better compared to the ones that it had on it. The interior of the car was still largely the same as what you would find in a Grand Prix, as were the suspension components, braking system, and pretty much everything else. The main difference between this car and lots of the other concepts that Pontiac built, though, was that this one could be fully driven. This was a fully running and driving prototype that still actually exists to this day and is allegedly owned and still periodically driven by Paul Farrago's nephew, which is pretty cool if you ask me. And last but not least, in our number one spot, we have the Pontiac Banshee XP833. Now, this is a car that I'm sure you were all waiting for on this list because, well, it is the most talked about and most storied Pontiac concept that never reached production. The Banshee was another love child of the famed John DeLorean, who set out to build a new experimental sports car to slot below the Corvette in 1966. Remember, at this time, the Camaro still hadn't yet hit the market, but it was about to, and there was a potential need to fill in the slot above the Camaro and below the Corvette. Because no matter what, the Camaro and Firebird were 4-seat pony cars. They were not a 2-seat sports car. And the thought was that there had to be another 2-seat sports car in the lineup, especially when cars like the AC Cobra were gaining so much notoriety. The thought was that more competitors were on the way, and Pontiac ought to have one. The idea was to combine the lightweight fiberglass construction techniques of the Corvette with a sporty Pontiac inline 6 to provide a lightweight and more cost-effective alternative to the Vette within GM's corporate umbrella. This inline 6 was the new for 1966 230 cubic inch single overhead cam Pontiac motor that in top trim could put out a respectable 215 horsepower. In what would have been the Sprint version for the Firebird. Sadly though, for some reason, the Banshee concept only got the base model 165 horsepower variant of this engine, likely to make it seem slower than they desired, so Chevy wouldn't get mad about the potential of it taking away Corvette sales on the basis of speed. But even with this 165 horsepower motor, the Banshee was still a featherweight of a car at just about 2,200 pounds with a wheelbase of just 91 inches. Even without an independent rear suspension setup, it was clear that the Banshee had serious potential. There was also a 326 cubic inch Pontiac V8 powered Banshee test mule that was built to see what it would have been like with a V8. The initial Banshee concept would sit on a custom frame that rated the GM parts bin from cars like the 1964 Tempest and others for a bulk of its suspension parts. The rear end was a generic GM 10-bolt live axle from the Tempest that was fitted with a Watts link to help improve handling. However, no matter what improvements Pontiac made to the underlying Banshee, the decision to bring the car into production was solely one for the higher-ups at GM, who, when presented with the car, chose to cancel the project and allocate no further funding to it, leaving the Banshee dead in the water. Thankfully, though, the Banshee concept car itself still exists today and actually went up for sale for just over $1 million. And those are the 5 most insane Pontiac concepts that you forgot existed. Thank you all for watching this video, and most importantly, let me know which of these cars was your favorite in the comments down below. Mine was definitely the Pegasus. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and also share this video with other enthusiasts. Also, please make sure that you're subscribed to the Rare Cars YouTube channel and smash that notification